Great. Well, thank you all. I'll turn the program over to our moderator, Dr. Mike Gorman, president of Your Salem Community College.
I
Mike?
appreciate it. I actually work for Maria Fantini, for all those who are aware. Uh, I will just give you a little bit of the origins of the conversation we had that brought us to this particular workshop. DEI has a resonance to it now that it didn't have a year ago or even 2 years ago, that has raised the significance, the importance of us understanding what we really mean when we say diversity, inclusion, equity, and so forth. And how you define each of those words can change depending upon your history, your place in the organization, as well as the culture of the organization. So when we were going through this, one of the things we discovered on campus was a program about subtle bias and things that really are within each of us that we have to recognize. I'll just throw it out there that I had taken this. Harvard has this equity test or something of that nature. I forget what you call it, and I'm sure Krista is familiar with it. But it's an instrument that you think that you are a very wide open, free thinking, embracing person until you take one of these things that shows you're really not quite as open as you might think. And there may be issues that you raise. And I alluded to it earlier that, with Zoom, you don't know how tall anybody is. And I had a colleague who I only knew through Zoom for about a year and a half or so. And I had this image of him being this 6 foot, ever present individual. And when I got to meet him, he was probably about 5'4" and kind of blended into the crowd. But in our dynamics, because I didn't have that bias in front of me, I had a very different approach toward him. So that opened the door to this conversation. So you didn't come here to listen to me. As an intro for Krista, Krista D. Newsom. She joined PSEG in 2019 and has been responsible for creating and advancing the company's diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy by designing a purpose-driven workplace culture a purpose-driven workplace culture where talent can reach their full potential. She is responsible for managing the success of several DEI programs and initiatives created to enhance the employee experience. I think that employee experience is something we always have to keep in mind. Krista also held roles of increasing responsibility with ADP, which a lot of us deal with, a global provider of human resources software and services. During her time at ADP, Krista spearheaded several strategic initiatives that facilitated the recognition of ADP arising to become a top 5 company for diversity. Krista has successfully led Global Business Resource Group, the External Partnership, Affirmative Action, Employer Brand, and Communication programs that elevated D&I as a business imperative. Krista has a passion for building workplaces that attract and engage top talent to drive better business results. Krista holds a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration and Human Resource Management from Georgian Court University, and an SHRM, which I know HR is Human Resources Management. I don't know what the S is for. You can do that in a moment there. Inclusive Workplace Culture Specialty Credential, which I know I've seen it with others, and it's an impressive one. As we go through this program, if you have questions, pop them into the chat. I'll be monitoring that as we go through. So Krista, this group is all yours.
Thank you so much. That was kind of weird to hear you give my whole bio, but I kind of liked it. So thank you. Thank you so much. And it's been a great pleasure to meet you, Mike and Bill and the rest of the team. And I'm really excited to be here today with all of you. Let me go ahead and start figuring out how to share my screen again. Krista Newsom, so happy to be here with you today. It was a pleasure to meet Mike and the rest of the group. And I'm excited to talk to you about this topic that, I've been really dedicated to for probably over a decade now. And it's been really interesting. Like you said, Mike, I think, post-pandemic, a lot of things have been amplified in the DEI space and, post some external factors as well. Like if we think about George Floyd and like civil kind of uprising that we've experienced since 2020, this topic has really hit a lot of the news channels and things that we watch, right? So I think that has also brought a lot more attention to the work, which is a good thing. And sometimes it could make things a little bit more difficult when politics get involved. But today, I'm just going to talk to you about the work really that we do inside of PSEG and why we believe that this work is so important to our company culture and ensuring that we attract the best talent to our organization and diverse teams that really are able to solve problems for us and get things done quickly and efficiently. So I always like to kind of share a little bit about me, right? So where I'm kind of coming from in this whole thing. So the picture to the left is me and my family. So I just had a son he's almost 16 months old now, but they're kind of the center of my world. So I just became a new mom. And that's been a really exciting role for me. Took maternity leave from PSEG. Thankfully, there's an inclusive parental leave policy for both men and women in our organization. So my husband also works for PS, and he was also able to take advantage of that policy, which we'll talk a little bit about how diversity and inclusion impacts our policies and programs at PSEG and at other organizations. Mike shared that I'm a graduate of Georgian Court University. That's in Ocean County, New Jersey. I am originally from Toms River, which is why I have a picture of the beach there. So that's a shot of Seaside Park. That's probably one of my favorite beaches. So yeah, really, I don't live down there now. I live up in Morris County in East Hanover. I'm a little bit closer up to Newark, where our corporate headquarters is, but that's where most of my family still is at. I love music. I love all kinds of music. It's kind of weird, actually. Like I'll have maybe some opera playing, some Andrea Bocelli that my grandmother kind of got me interested in that, and then country music. So kind of a wide spectrum of music that I'm interested in, and also, kind of speaks to the diversity out there of opportunities when you think about music and those things. I'm also a big history buff. I love history. My husband thinks I'm really like a nerd. Some of the stuff that I watch, he's like, how do you watch this? This is so boring, but I love it, right? And I also love food. So I am half Italian. So my mother's Italian. So I grew up with kind of being centered around family and food and Sunday dinners. And so I still carry that with me today. And I hope to also share that with my son. And then the house picture is, we're always doing renovations in our house. So it seems like that's always an ongoing thing around here. So we just finished a couple projects and, on to another one soon. So that takes up a lot of my time as well. But that's a little bit about me. And then, hopefully throughout our time together, I'll get to learn a little bit more about you and the things that make you who you are and your story. I hope to make this interactive. I'm really glad. It sounds like most of the group kind of knows each other for the most part. So I'm hoping, just feel free to jump in, and there's going to be segments of the discussion today where I'm going to want to hear from you. I want to hear your story and where you're from. So just diving into a little bit of the topics that I want to cover for us. So kind of level setting on what is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, right? What are those definitions? And Mike, like you said, definitions can be different for different people, and also what space you're working in. So I'm going to talk a little bit about like high level definitions and then how we think about these categories at PSEG. I'm also going to talk about the business case for DEIB, and I added that B around belonging. We'll talk a little bit about what that means. why this matters to companies, why it should matter to you and the work that you're doing, and how it really can impact your bottom line. Then we're going to talk about unconscious bias. So this really is probably one of the barriers to building and sustaining diverse teams and corporations. And it's again, Mike, you said it, it's this subtle bias. It's these things that we really don't know that we're doing, but we are. So what is that? Why do we do it? How do we address it? And then I'm going to talk a little bit about 6 traits of inclusive leaders. So none of us are perfect, right? We all have biases. Some biases are good. Some biases are bad and they impact people in a negative way. So as you show up in your roles in your companies and the work that you do, how can you kind of combat and mitigate that bias to ensure that folks want to work with you and they give you the best that they can give, and that they're productive, right, on your teams? So that's a little bit about what we will talk about today. So here I have this kind of Venn diagram that kind of shows the interrelation between these topics: diversity, equity, and inclusion. So diversity really is all of the elements and characteristics that define each and every one of us. So at a macro level, I mean, this can mean race, this can mean gender, but this can mean just like your preference for a certain thing. It could be your mindset. It could be your religion. It could be your physical appearance that we mentioned, right? Are you tall? Are you short? It's all of the things that make you who you are. From a corporate perspective, when we really think about diversity, we think about all of those things, but we're really looking to measure representation in our organization. And that really aligns back to affirmative action goals. So that's why when we think about diversity, we are thinking about race, gender, sexual orientation, people with disabilities, because we do have a requirement to ensure those folks are represented within our organization. The bar is actually very, very low. However, so PSEG goes well above and beyond what is required of us as an organization. And we do that because we understand that there is a business benefit to all of this work. So when we think about diversity, we're thinking about those things that we can measure and report back on from a representation standpoint. The equity piece is the state, quality, or ideal of being impartial and fair treatment for all people, so that the norms, practices, and policies in a place ensure identity is not a predictor of workplace outcomes. And I have another slide where we'll talk a little bit more in depth about equity, because I know that's a hot topic right now. Inclusion is the piece where, okay, we're all here, right? We have representation from all different parts of our country, our state, what have you, right? But just because you're here, do you feel like you're valued? Do you feel like you're respected? Are your thoughts and ideas asked for? And when they are asked for, are they acknowledged and taken seriously? So diversity, like a common kind of saying people have, is, you're being asked to the party. Inclusion is you're being asked to dance at the party, right? And it's the degree to which employees find meaning and purpose in their work is inclusion. You matter, essentially. You're not just here because you're a number. Belonging is an employee's sense that who they are is accepted and appreciated. And that's really an accumulation of day-to-day experiences. So do you feel like, yeah, I'm here, they invite me to the meetings, they ask me my ideas, but my ideas are getting implemented. I'm constantly being seeked out for information, right? Or they want me to join them at an event, a dinner. I'm building relationships with people. I have friends at work. I have people that I trust at work. So that's really like the end all be all, right? Like when you come to an organization, you want that sense of belonging. You want to feel like, yeah, this is my home away from home, right? Because we're at work most of the time, and you want to feel comfortable at work. So that's really what we strive for at the end of the day. The work is a journey. Like this stuff changes, it grows, it's challenging, because we'll talk a little bit about that, the bias that kind of creeps in, whether, we'll just assume like everybody's coming from a good place. Let's put aside like, discrimination and stereotypes, and you're coming into the game with, yeah, I consciously don't like that person because of what they look like. We're not talking about that stuff today. We're talking about, you come in and you think you're inclusive, right? Or you want to be inclusive and you have all the best intentions, but sometimes, these unconscious things that have built up really over time from when we're children, 2-3 years old, like you're building those perceptions from the culture, and those creep in. How do those creep in? So we'll talk a little bit about that. Again, we know that equitable employers outpace their competitors, and they do that by respecting the unique needs of all individuals, all perspectives of their team. They pull out the best from their teams. As a result, diverse and inclusive workplaces, they earn deeper trust and more commitment from their employees. And like I mentioned earlier, at the end of the day, it's higher productivity from folks when they feel that they belong and can do their best work. Diverse workplaces also experience 5.4 times higher retention rates than companies without inclusive workplace cultures. So just think about the cost of hiring. For us, it's millions, right, every year. So when we do all of that work to attract talent, to onboard them, we don't want to lose them, right? We want our company to be a culture where they feel like they can do their best work, and again, that they belong and they want to stay with us. So I want to just go back to the equity piece, because PS, we just added this into our little tagline, right? And I think a lot of companies did that over the past couple of years. And I don't think it's to say that we weren't focused on it. I think it's just being called out more specifically. And I think companies are making a lot more of an effort to identify, what is the difference between equity and equality, and what are we doing as an organization to adjust for that? And a lot of times we were, but it's kind of just being a little bit more laser focused on it. So equality and equity, the fair treatment of equality of access to opportunity, information, and resources. It's built through the identification and elimination of unfair biases, stereotypes, or barriers that may inadvertently exclude employees or people. Leaders are faced with an increase of pressure from external markets to build inclusive cultures, not only by their shareholders, but by the employees that work for them. Corporations, we often strive to create equal workplaces, right? It's required that we do. And of course, people want to do the right thing, but it also is a requirement, right? Let's just keep that in mind. By treating everybody the same. And so practices, sometimes equality can mean everybody accessing the same things that might be inflexible, or processes that have little consideration for the variation of needs that people have. So this might mean employees actually experience unfair work environment, even though everything is equal. So an equity strategy focuses on kind of leveling the playing field. And that's the image that I have up for you today. I thought for me, this was just a super easy way to kind of think about it. Yeah, everybody got a box, right? It's the same box, it's equal. It doesn't mean that they could see the soccer game, even though they all got the same thing. But by providing folks with the different tools that they need to be successful, now they all have the same view of the game. So no, the tools and resources they're getting are not the same. They're not equal, they're different. But their view of the game is the same now. And that's what we want. We want everybody to be operating at the same playing field, the same level. Another example that we give all of our employees is, something about technology, right? So when you get onboarded at a company, you get the same computer, you get the same keyboard, you get the same software. It's equality, right? Everybody gets the same thing. But think about someone who is blind. That doesn't help them accomplish their work. So in order to make in an equitable workplace, that person that has that disability, we provide them with different technology that enables them to do their work at the same degree. It could be like giving them a larger monitor, or they get a Braille keyboard. So again, making those little changes to get people what they need to be successful is really what equity is to PSEG and a lot of other organizations. Okay. So the business case, why do we care, right? We care because we're good people and we want to see everybody be happy and successful, right? Sometimes in business, it's not just about the feel-good stuff. It's important, but it's not the reality. So there's a lot of research over the decades of research that now it is very, very clear that diverse teams result in higher profits for organizations. And then just really quickly, I want to go back to the talent piece. So hiring people, we're in this war for talent. It never ends. It's very real. It's really, really hard to hire good people with the right skill sets, especially in the post-pandemic world. And then you may have also heard about the Great Resignation. So people have decided, after the pandemic, I want to change my career. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go somewhere else. So people are leaving if, the company and what they're doing is not aligned directly to their values and their purpose. So in addition to that, we have market meltdowns and slow growth, inflation. So it's just more and more pressure on businesses. So business leaders understand that the new normal of business means building the best teams. Top talent doesn't want to work at a company that's not inclusive. I don't think any of us here would either. You don't want to go to work and feel like, you get disrespected every day. They're walking out the door, right? They have other options. They want flexibility as well. And if we don't offer that, they're also out the door. Just employee motivations have changed so much over, I guess, the past 20 years, and it's continuing to accelerate. In the past, and I think this is true for PS, competitive compensation. As long as we pay the most, that's all people care about. And that may have been true, right? And it still is to a certain extent, but people want the compensation, but they also want other things. They want remote work, right? It's become significantly mainstream. And in our business, that's not always, and a lot of times it's not always possible, right? But where can we be a little bit more flexible with folks? Where can we change some scheduling things? How can we make it a little bit easier for people? People want to know that you're thinking about those things. So work-life balance, I like to say work-life integration, because I don't think there really is ever a balance, but it's integrating work into your life as best as you can. And then also companies with a really strong purpose are an attractive proposition, not only to millennials, but also Gen Z. So what does your company stand for? What are you about? What's your mission? And when I get here, do you really live those values, or was it just like something that you put on your website, right? So I think people kind of see really quickly what you're all about once they get in the door. So So employees want you to put your money where your mouth is, right? They want all those things that you said that you were to be true. And if not, they're leaving, and that has impacts to the bottom line. Employees expect a personalized employee experience that meets their needs at every stage of their career. I mentioned to you that I just was out on maternity leave. Some organizations are not able to offer as much maternity leave as I got. A lot of other companies offer more to ensure that they retain talent. A lot of companies now, like I mentioned, offer parental leave to fathers, and that's also a big benefit. And as these things kind of grow over time in other organizations, if you're not offering it, your organization is not going to be as desirable as others are, and you're going to lose that top talent. And they want to see themselves in leadership. So when you look at a company and you're looking to get hired, or you're looking to make a move, a lot of times, diverse talent, and I put that in air quotes, is, you want to see somebody who looks like you. So for me as a woman, do I see women at PSEG that are at the C-suite? Do I see women on the board? Do I see female managers? If I don't see that, maybe this company isn't somewhere where they're going to be so accepting of me. So ensuring that your organization looks like the people that you want to hire is really, really important, because you can't see yourself, if you don't see yourself reflected in the organization through leadership, we lose folks. And especially in the state of New Jersey, right? Like, we have a very, very diverse state. I believe we will be majority minority within the next couple of years. So if we're not doing the right things to ensure that all of the diversity within the state of New Jersey is represented in our company, those people are going somewhere else, and we just kind of shrink our talent pool. So really, really important for us. So some stats that I pulled from McKinsey, from their Diversity Wins 2020 report: companies in the top quartile for gender diversity within their executive teams, they're 25% more likely than companies in the fourth quartile to have above average profitability. The most gender diverse companies see a substantial differential likelihood of outperformance by 48% over the least gender diverse companies. So that's gender diversity throughout the organization, in addition to the leadership roles. And then if you think about just ethnic and cultural diversity, companies in the top quartile bested those in the fourth quartile by 36%. So there's something to this, right? It's not just a feel good. When we bring different ideas to the table and we're able to work together effectively, we bring the best ideas to the table. We're the most innovative. And if you just, take a step back, and I think about the United States as a whole, right? It's true that diversity makes us so, so much stronger. So really, really exciting stuff. So if everything is great and there's all the stats and we know this is the right thing to do, and it makes us better, it gives us, more profitability at the end of the day, what kind of holds us back from all of this work? And that's when we start talking about bias. There's a lot of other barriers, and we could spend probably months together kind of talking all through them. But today we're going to focus specifically on unconscious bias and how that impacts our efforts in DEIB. So what is bias exactly? Bias itself is a preference or a prejudice for or against something. Not all bias is bad. For example, you may have a preference for people in your family, right? Those are the people that you love. That makes sense. You have a favorite sports team, or your college that you went to, right? Those are your favorite things. You have a bias towards them. The issue arises when that bias kind of positively impacts or even negatively impacts someone else and creates an unfair or an unfair advantage or an unfair disadvantage to other people. So if you're in a decision-making position and you let your bias creep in, right? Well, I hired this person because she looks like me, right? She went to the same school. She loves the same sports team as I do. But the other person didn't. They didn't look like me. You know, I don't really know where they're from or anything. And I just felt more comfortable with this person because they were like me. That person lost that opportunity, right? They could have been the better person for the job. So it's really important that we understand what our biases are and how can we start to uncover what our unconscious bias is. So unconscious bias, or also coined implicit bias, happens without us even knowing it. Experts believe, and Mike, you had shared coming out of Harvard Business, I was actually going to reference that as well. Banaji, Dr. Banaji really kind of coined this whole piece, this whole piece of research. And that's where a lot of this information I'm sharing with you comes from. And I'll share links and resources and stuff if you want to dig into it more. But experts from Harvard and other places believe that a majority of our decisions are made by our unconscious minds. Our brains are wired to make cognitive shortcuts to help us process the millions of information that we receive every second. I think it's like every second, our brains are receiving 11 million pieces of information, and we can only process 40. So in order to make decisions, we rely on our unconscious mind to kind of keep us safe. So we make snap judgments, which sometimes are not wrong, but sometimes they're not right? They might not be aligned with our conscious values, right? So I mentioned, we want to show up and be good people, right? That's consciously, we want to do that. But there could be something in your unconscious mind, things that you grew up with, things that you saw that kind of imprinted on your mind. And in a result, it may have you act in ways that have unintentional consequences for yourself and for other people. And again, why focus on this stuff? Because we are good people, right? We want to be fair towards others, but that unconscious mind kind of gets in our way. So by bringing awareness to our unconscious minds, we can help make better decisions and actions that are more aligned with our beliefs, and in turn, make our companies better. So I'm going to stop talking there, and then I'm going to see if I could play a video. Let me see here how I can make that happen. Just give me 1 second. All right, can you see this video up here? It says blind spots, challenge assumptions.
It's it's on still at the moment, but we can see it.
Okay, I'm gonna play it. Let's see. I just want to make sure video settings.
You want to make sure the sound is on.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to try to do. All right, I'm just going to go for it and just let me know if this works or not.
Are you seriously considering her as a candidate?
Can you hear it?
You're good. You're good.
Okay. Let me start it over.
Are you seriously considering her as a candidate?
Don't trust.
She's a woman.
She's a woman.
This is a man's
She's
job. Clearly not educated.
She can speak English.
That's not me. I'm not like that. You call it an honest mistake. Science calls it a blind spot. Our unconscious mind is a mysterious and powerful thing. It makes 90% of our decisions without us even knowing it. Our brains are overloaded with 11 million pieces of information every second. Yet we can only process about 40 of them. So we're wired to make cognitive shortcuts using past experiences to make assumptions. And you know what happens when we assume. Our unconscious mind can put us on autopilot, determining where we sit, who we eat lunch with, who we turn to for advice, and who we choose to offer a helping hand. Living our lives with blind spots can put us in a tunnel. Same point of view, same decisions, same outcomes. We can find ourselves trapped in the land of snap judgments and misconceptions. We've all been on both the giving and receiving end of blind spots. Think about it. Who's talented? Who's able? Who can I trust? Who belongs? We've all been there. Blind spots are part of the human condition. Our choices have consequences for us and the people we interact with. By accepting that blind spots exist, we can stop. Imagine what possibilities exist if we could do it all over again. Different perspectives, inclusive relationships, diverse networks, better outcomes, seeing people for who they really are. People like you with unlimited potential. We all have blind spots. Once you accept that you have them, you can choose to do something about it. It's time to check your blind spots and focus on what's possible.
So I just think that's a great kind of video that showcases, you know, what these blind spots are and how they creep in. So let me see if I can go back to this again. I have another video, so I might just, can you still see my screen okay? I might just leave it like this just to simplify.
We're fine.
Okay, so who do these unconscious bias impact? All of us, right? It doesn't matter if you're Black, white, Spanish, Asian, we all have them. We all have these biases. It's not in one particular group that has them. We all do. Why? Because we're hardwired to manage information and risk. It's just in our nature to do that as human beings. And when do these things pop up? They mostly will happen when we're multitasking and when we're under a lot of pressure and trying to get things done really, really quickly. You know, you just make that decision really quick. You're not thinking about anything else. You just want to get that thing accomplished. And that's when the bias kind of sets in. So if you're interested in taking the implicit bias test that Dr. Menage has put together from Harvard University, I have the link here. It's completely confidential. And what she does is she'll take you through a bunch of, it's like an association test and how quickly you can make associations with different concepts. So one of the examples is when you hear women, do you think of career or home? Boom, you make the decision. And she'll go through like a bunch of things like that to see where your mind quickly takes you. And again, it's not a bad thing. It's just kind of, again, level setting. Where do you stand? What are those blind spots that you have that we can maybe try to uncover? So I have another video I wanted to share with you too. And this is all from PwC. They have a bunch of good videos. Let's see if I could get the other one. Here you go. So Mike, I was so happy when you had mentioned the first impression thing, or, you know, being on Zoom and you had an impression of somebody. This is really interesting.
You want this. Happy, engaged employee.
How first impressions will fool you and how quickly it happens.
Psychologist Alexander Todorov has discovered the mathematics underlying our first impressions. Using data he's collected from thousands of people at Princeton University, Dr. Todorov has built a computer program that can pinpoint the very parts of a face that trigger our gut instincts. That is, whether someone looks aggressive, introverted, attractive, and so on. See for yourself. As quickly as you can, answer this question. Which of these two people is more trustworthy, A or B? And what about from this pair? And this one? This probably wasn't hard. And in fact, you could have done it even faster. Here's Dr. Todorov.
You don't need more than 160 to 100 milliseconds to get pretty much the same first impression you will get from the limited time.
This was Dr. Todorov's first finding, that first impressions are fast. The second finding is perhaps even more surprising. Almost everyone sees the same thing. Consider the faces you just saw. If you're like the majority of people in Dr. Todorov's studies, these are the ones you chose as being more trustworthy. And what about competence? Just look at this face created by Dr. Todorov's software. The changes to this face are small. The tilt of the mouth, the size of the brow, the distance between the eyes. And yet, taken together, these features trigger a judgment. If we're honest, we'll admit that this face seems to be gaining and losing IQ points right in front of our very eyes. We're all familiar with sayings like, don't judge a book by its cover, but we do. And Dr. Todorov's studies show this too.
We did some studies presenting participants' faces of politicians, and it turns out that using judgments of naive participants, we can predict about 70% of the electoral outcomes. In a nutshell, politicians who happen to look more competent than their rivals are more likely to win in the elections.
These findings, which included almost every major congressional candidate for the 2004 to 2008 elections, are incredible. Campaign promises, advertisements, and experience aside, what really matters is how you look. And faces don't just sway who we elect to lead our governments. They also affect who we hire, who we give opportunities to, who we promote. Now, if everyone sees the same thing when they look at a face, it raises the question, are these impressions accurate? Do people look more competent because they actually are more competent? Do they look more trustworthy because they are more trustworthy? The short answer is no.
Often the natural assumption is there must be some kernel of truth in these impressions. But if you look closely at the data, there's very, very little evidence that these judgments are accurate. In many situations, you can ignore completely the face and your judgment will be much better.
If faces are so misleading, the question then, of course, is why? Why do our brains do this? Here's a popular theory for the case of trustworthiness. We look more trustworthy the more we look like babies. Large eyes, small chins, round faces, these are the features we love about infants, the most trustworthy creatures there are. So when adults possess these features, we view them as more trustworthy, kind, and honest. Research tells us we're more likely to agree with baby-faced adults, to accept their offers in negotiations. We're even less likely to convict baby-faced defendants for premeditated crimes, and more likely to give them more lenient sentences when we do. And what does this mean for the workplace? Are baby-faced employees more likely to get the benefit of the doubt in a workplace dispute? Does the width of your jaw influence your hireability? Clearly, our first impressions can get us into trouble. So let's talk about how to get around them and make better decisions. It's hard. First impressions are fast and they're automatic. But if we can admit that these judgments happen, we can find simple ways to outsmart our minds. How many times have you said or heard something like this?
I felt like I could trust her as soon as I met her.
Or, I can really see him in this role. When you catch these moments, ask a simple question. Based on what? Want something stronger? Here's one senior leader in education's strategy. As soon as I meet someone, I acknowledge my first impression in the first 5 seconds and spend the rest of the interview trying to prove myself wrong. Be your own devil's advocate by challenging your first impressions. Finally, when applicable, try putting off the face-to-face early on in the hiring process. Focus on hard evidence of skill, talent, and experience that's in a resume or other objective forms of data as a first step. We can all be blinded by first impressions, but with regular practice, we can learn to look past the surface.
And I saw in the chat, yes, I can send you all the links to these videos and some other resources that I think you might want to check out if you're interested in learning a little bit more. So now I want to hear from you. I want to hear about, your background, your life experiences, what makes you you. Kind of take a second to think about those things. And in particular, a significant event in your life that may have impacted the way that you view the world. Did that specific event impact the way that you perceive others? Did that event impact the way you interact with others? Maybe in the past, right? Maybe today. Where do you see bias showing up in the things that you do, either in the workplace or just in your everyday interactions? So again, I'll pass it to the group and see if you have anything, you wanted to share. So thank you.
I'm not one to allow silence. So I'll just throw it in there. And I did talk to Krista about it with Bill when we were prepping for this. I had an occasion where I had someone come in with a handicap for an interview for a position. And I was immediately taken back because of this person's handicap. And my initial reaction, I knew viscerally, was, well, I don't want to hire this individual. I knew that going into the interview. The interview didn't go very well, but I ended up hiring the person who really should not have gotten the job. And the mechanics of it were me overcompensating because I knew I was jumping to a conclusion, and that tainted everything I did beyond that. So I ended up bringing somebody on. It didn't work out. So I created a failure for two individuals, actually many more than that, but for the individual I hired as well as myself, by trying to acknowledge something and overstepping and such. So it really tainted how I do things. And I've tried to pull myself away and be a little bit more objective since then. I don't really know whether I've succeeded or not.
Thanks, Mike, for sharing that story. And, it's kind of like the opposite, right? You were trying to make sure that you weren't biased or, being discriminatory in any way. And like you said, you kind of overcompensated for that. And, that happens a lot at our organization as well, right? Like, we have all these legal requirements. We have affirmative action goals. We have these aspirational goals that are not associated with an external requirement from the government. So, we'll bring a diverse slate of candidates to folks. And sometimes what happens is, oh, I have to hire that woman. I have to hire the Asian person, right? And, you don't, right? It has to be who is the most qualified person for that position, based on those objective kind of data points that we heard about, because it does a disservice to that person, right? We shouldn't just hire because you look like a certain thing, or you fit into the box. That hurts the person. And a lot of times, and Mike and I talked about it a little bit too, is, you do have a person on your team that's different from you, whatever that difference is, and you don't give that person like the feedback, that you really think they should get, because it might be hard to hear. And a lot of times, underrepresented groups, right? Because the majority of situations is you do have a white male in a leadership position. And if they are working with an African-American person or someone from a different racial group, you don't want to like say, hey, you could have did better on this, because you don't want to hurt their feelings or be perceived as you're discriminating, right? So that's a barrier too. And then that person, there's a lot of research behind this too, and I've heard like personal accounts from things over the years. It's a disservice to that person again, because now they don't have the feedback they need to be better, to perform better. So trying to break down those barriers and build like and have an inclusive leadership style, getting to know your people, building relationships with them, it's going to be easier for you to have those difficult conversations. So thanks, Mike, for sharing your story. Is there anybody else that wants to share a story? It doesn't have to be work related. It could be, just something that you've experienced in your life. Maybe you saw something, and it wasn't you particular that you want to share, or, it did involve you.
Christina, I can share something that happened to me. This is a very long time ago now, probably 30-something years ago, early in my career, where I joined a team of folks who was at an education institution, not Salem Community College, prior to my experience there, where I joined a team of folks who were predominantly male, older white males. There were maybe 2 other women on this team, and we were trainers working for a local college, but providing training to a very large local business. Anyway, I was told that I was not, by a coworker now, not by a supervisor, not by anyone in a management position, that I would never succeed there because I couldn't relate to the population. I was taking a man's job. I was taking a job away from someone who would be trying to provide for their family. So I would never get that job, and I would never succeed in it, even if I did get it. So as a 20-something-year-old at the time, it was very discouraging. But obviously, it didn't, it didn't discourage me enough to continue to try, and actually did do really well in that position, which helped me to 2-3 other positions, obviously, to where I am now. But one thing it did do was really open my eyes to a work environment and to understand that I had to understand that culture before I was able to really, number one, accept it, but number two, fit in. And I'm not saying it certainly wasn't the right thing for that person to say to me, but if I wanted to work there, I needed to understand that. And I couldn't really have it, even if I felt like I had a chip on my shoulder. And if I did about it, I really couldn't show that, because then I wasn't going to be able to fit in or succeed in that environment.
Thanks, Linda. Yeah, and it's so many years ago, but it obviously is something that has stuck with you for a long time, right? And it sounds like you remember it like very clearly.
Oh, I do.
Incident.
I can see the gentleman's face. However, I will also say that it was very frustrating at the time, obviously, and I do remember it. But I can also say that I know that even in that same environment, that would never happen today. That person would have never gotten away with that ever, and they wouldn't. I mean, that's pretty
much right. That's kind of in your face.
Yes.
So yeah. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else?
Yes, this is Harvey. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had an experience when I was first employed. It was the job required a specific license to perform a specific line of duty, and at that time, there were no Black employees at that particular location that had obtained that degree of a license. So I did finally obtained that Gold Seal engineer's license. But I was the only Black employee at that time in the company that had one.
Mhm.
So the job that required, the supervisor's job required a Gold Seal license holder with a specific amount of experience to back that license up. So I had both. I can recall that there was another young man who had a Red Seal license, who had equal amount of experience, and the job was going to be awarded to him. Of course, he was a white employee. Me being a Black employee with a Gold Seal license was not going to get the job until I start raising just a little bit of noise, and brought up the fact that the job required a Gold Seal license, and I had that license and experience. So they had to give it to me, and that experience alone had really, it hurt me for a long time. But really, the kicker was after I was awarded the position of supervisor, I started getting these notes and these notifications, written notes in my locker, and they did not hesitate to use the N-word or ask the questions: how did you get this license? Who gave it to you? Who did you buy? Who did you buy off? Or whatever the case may be. So to get that action stopped, to get those that harassment stopped, I had to threaten my supervisor with civil action. And it was a mess for about 1.5 years, but it finally smoothed itself over. And I was finally accepted as a supervisor at this particular position. But that experience left an indelible mark on me for many years, that I did not feel equal because of the color of my skin. I always remember the words of Martin Luther King, that don't judge me by the color of my skin, just by the content of my character. And that wasn't the case at that time. So that was my experience, but I overcame it. They finally accepted me as a supervisor, but it goes to show you that sometimes biases are not so much subtle.
Right.
You know, that is very abrasive and it's very upfront. And even though it does exist today, it's not as abrasive to me. And I've been accepted in many of my undertakings with other boards and my experience with other people. And I cannot honestly say that I have experienced any degree of bias or prejudice along the way. And I do appreciate that. So.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I can't imagine how that must have felt, going through something like that. I am happy though to hear that, you overcame it. And, it sounds like throughout the years, you've built a lot of good relationships. Like you said, people, trust you, respect you, for what you do. So thankfully it was able to kind of change course. Sometimes it doesn't, right? And people just continually experience that time and time again.
Well, sometimes you just keep carrying it along, you keep carrying it along with you, and it does you no good to do that. So at some point you got to drop and move on. So
right. Thank you, Harvey.
My staff get tired of hearing this story, but being someone who was raised in a treatment community with kids from all over New Jersey and staff who most of whom didn't look like me, didn't have the same background as me, didn't come from a same walk of life as me. So on the positive side, that was just a tremendous experience for me as a child, and then coming up. On the flip side of that, as I got out, started going to school and got into the community and had other friends or acquaintances locally or high school or in the community, and they didn't have those same kind of feelings or had racial prejudice or coming to it was a shocker to me. Like I thought, I can't believe people feel this way, or what, this is strange to me. But the time in my life that it really struck home for me, and you would think being raised in America and being what I just shared with you, it wouldn't have. The time it really struck home to me was I had the opportunity to spend time as a volunteer in England, and then later reconnect with family in Ireland. And it was the religious prejudice that struck home with me between Catholics and Protestants. I just was shocked about that. Much like Harvey just said, I have a cousin who was the only Catholic that worked for a Chrysler plant in Northern Ireland, and had extreme prejudice and physical threatening and things along those lines in his life. I had an experience in Glasgow, Scotland, where it was real. Like somebody was going to hurt somebody in this pub if you didn't say that you were Protestant. And I knew that I am now Catholic, but at the time I was Protestant. I knew I had a guy sitting right next to me who was Catholic, and this was not going to go well. And so that's when it really then brought it all home to me about what our brown and black brothers and sisters here in America go through every day. Of the situation, it struck a chord with me.
Thanks, Steve. Anybody else? Paul, you came off mute. Did you want to share anything?
I'm trying to figure out the question, Krista. So if it comes out half baked, please,
Yeah, I mean, it's not really one right? You could pick kind of.
Yeah, I guess the issue relates back to some of our challenges at the chamber, right? And Jennifer has been, so good at kind of setting the table for this, and working alongside Harvey and Mike and others, looking at this issue of how do we increase the number of Black and brown business people, nonprofit leaders, faith community, others at the table here in Salem. And I'm admittedly a new guy. I'm, a new kid here in town, so I'm still trying to learn and understand. But the issue of that Harvey raised, these perception issues remain in people's heads, and so there is this, group of people who own businesses, who lead organizations, who, do other things that contribute to the health and well-being of this community, but don't, for some reason or another, participate. Now, is that a perception issue? Is it something that all of us could share in the responsibility to change, to improve? We're looking from the foundation's perspective, trying to figure out, what's our role in making sure that we reach those individuals and families and others whose health and wellness outcomes are disproportionately poor, for example, right? I mean, that's one of the things that we're trying to do. But, there are kind of large groups of people who just aren't kind of participating. And I don't know what the answer to that is. And I'm not expecting that you would know it either, Krista, but I think it is something that we need to kind of put in front of us and all kind of make an effort to do something different. So I know it sounds a little half-baked, but the point of the chamber is to make sure, from my perspective anyway, anytime I've participated in other chamber activities in other places, is to make sure that people who lead businesses in particular, but also, nonprofit groups and other organizations, that there's a level playing field for everybody and that people thrive as a result of the business community's presence. So.
Thanks, Paul. So it sounds like there are, other diverse communities within Salem County that have businesses or nonprofits, like you said, but they're not a part of the chamber.
I think that's one of the things that our committee is looking at is making sure that we do our best to be as inclusive as possible. And again, I want to, commend the chamber for the efforts it's making. But, what else can all of us as members do individually? What can we do to encourage people to participate? How do we, reduce this perception issue that maybe Black or brown people don't feel welcome? I don't know what it is, but we clearly have a group of people who aren't participating as actively as we'd like. So I think we have to work on that, right? This big conversation about inclusiveness and diversity and equity, et cetera, is important. But for us here in Salem, what can we do in our own backyard to improve the situation?
Piggybacking on that, Paul, and I appreciate you raising it because we did make some significant efforts a few years ago, pre-pandemic. They were not as productive as we had hoped. They helped a little bit, but they really didn't move the needle. They just helped a little bit. And now we have what will, I hope, become a standing committee of DEI that Harvey has been kind enough to take. But even in doing that, there was this sense of bias that, again, you pointed out in your presentation, sometimes there's bias that runs positive as well. I hate to put it that way because it doesn't sound right, but Dave Yellen, who had done the effort previously, pre-pandemic, to try and move the needle with minorities, said, we don't need an old white guy chairing this again because we were about to appoint him again. And that's when it came to mind that, yeah, we need somebody that's going to represent a different part of the community. And that's when I volunteered Harvey because he missed that meeting. But I also know Harvey well enough that this would be something that would be close to his heart, and that this would make it a lot more credible than if Dave took the committee or if I took the committee and such. But we do look at, okay, well, we have this DEI committee. Should we have a minority individual running it? Well, in this case, because it's Harvey, absolutely yes. If it weren't Harvey, maybe we'd have a different set of questions to ask. Probably rambling on that, but it goes back to my problem of sometimes overcompensating.
Yeah, and I want to be clear, Mike, I think that the chamber has done some really creative efforts on this long before I got here and even since I've been here, and I'm excited to continue to advance those. But is there anything else in particular that we could do as a group, and whether it's as a group or even individually, to make sure that people feel welcome and that they are included, and that we, figure that big businesses, small business, everything in between are welcome at the chamber's table?
Good point.
Not that I'm, want to try to solve it or anything, but could you host like an open house and then maybe like have direct invitations, like personalized invitations? You go out and kind of meet people where they are and tell them what you're trying to do and invite them to some kind of open forum where you talk about the benefits of joining the chamber. Like invite those particular groups you're trying to reach.
I suspect that Jennifer and Mike and Harvey could answer that, because there's again been a history of things that have happened, including, scholarship memberships and things like that. But there is, I think also what's something you just mentioned, that whole kind of personal touch, right? The personal relationship. So, I think it's incumbent on all of us who are members in particular to do our best to reach out to people whenever possible and encourage people to join and be part of this. But there's a welcoming environment.
I think that the open house suggestion is a good thing. But what comes to my mind is I must ask myself the question that every member of the chamber, no matter what efforts we make towards including everyone, what percentage of the members of the chamber are really unlikely to embrace DEI. So not everyone does, and not everyone will. I think part of our task is that we have to find what that nucleus is that will embrace DEI, and it's a difficult decision, a difficult thing to do. As a matter of fact, I have asked the question, well, how many minority owners are in the chamber or in Salem County, not necessarily in the chamber? That's a difficult question to answer. But I've taken it upon myself to try to compile a list of those minority-owned businesses. This will give me a good head start as to what our position is going to be moving forward. Some difficult questions, some difficult things that we must ask ourselves. We have to ask ourselves those tough questions. Do minority owners feel welcomed at the chamber? Or are we doing things that we should stop doing, or should we start doing things that we're not doing? But we have to find out what they are and when to incorporate them. Because if you approach them in the wrong direction, we don't want to sully the reputation of the chamber by going out left field somewhere we shouldn't be going. In terms of DEI, we have to find out who those businesses are that embrace DEI, or at least do it in such a way that we don't offend anyone. So that's a task also that we face, and I'm sure that Paul knows. We've talked about it. We've discussed that at our last meeting, and it's a subject that we have to approach appropriately and in the right manner.
Harvey, I know this is going to send a shiver up his spine, but I'm volunteering Ron Burkhart to help you with assembling any data that you might need. He's very good at going at that, so I'll send you and he a note after the meeting to make him a resource to you. He can access this fairly readily for you.
Okay, thank you.
Something that we did at PSEG, which may be helpful to you. We have a DEI commitment statement. So we kind of took a step back and said, who do we want to be, right? You know, what is important to us when we think about DEI? And then we made a pledge, right? And then our employees signed that pledge. You know, maybe it's as simple as starting there too, right? Like, could you incorporate different types of language into your mission statement? You know, I don't know if you have that or not, right? Or if you have a website, could you add, you know, something around, you know, this new way that you want to operate and infuse DEI into those operating guidelines that you share with people, at least kind of like putting a stake in the ground. And then, you know, like I said in the presentation, you got to back that up somehow, right? Like whatever that's going to look like. But that could be a good place to start too while you're gathering the data. You know, how do you incorporate DEI into your operating procedures?
Yes.
Krista, I want to ask a question that may be pertinent here. New Jersey seems to have a rather open and liberal posture toward DEI. However, there are 17 states that currently have active legislation in either creation or preparation for vote that is moving the DEI initiative in a very different direction. I want to say counterproductive, but I'm going to just say different for the moment. What can we be doing in our own world to make sure that we don't fall into some of this trap? Some of the legislation that's proposed, I don't anticipate it'll pass, or if it does, I'm not sure it'll pass muster with the judiciary. But the fact that it's even being brought forward is telling us that there's at least an undercurrent contrary to what we're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah, I'm not very familiar with the exact policies or laws that you referenced. You know, from PSEG's perspective, though, like I just think about, you know, the Roe versus Wade decision in the courts, right? From the company's position, when that happened, we don't take a political position on those things. What we ensure is that our employees know that they have the resources available to them through our benefits programs, right? Whether that's medical needs or even psychological support through our Be Well program. So, you know, we don't have position on those political matters. We just have communications that share with employees that this continues to be, whatever those changes ever become, right? That doesn't impact the way that we treat people in the organization, our inclusive culture, and employees feeling that there's a sense of belonging that they can experience at our organization. Those things never change, and those are unwavering for us. So I know I didn't answer your question, but
It's okay.
I would just like to say, this is the best presentation and the best definition of DEI that I've ever heard. I mean, it was extremely powerful, and the way you presented it, I think folks maybe that don't understand DEI and are resistant to it because they don't understand it, this is going to be phenomenal for them to watch.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. So I did have just a couple of other kind of things to leave you with. You know, and this may help you as you think about the goals that you have for the chamber. You know, what are inclusive leadership skills? So, and I'll send this to you too, obviously. So, you know, being accountable, right, to yourself, to your team members, in the way that you do things, your processes and procedures, be accountable to ensuring those things, you know, you're mitigating bias in the best way that you can. Take ownership. And it sounds like, you know, you all are, right? You know, you want to do the right thing, and you're going to start to make some changes, and that's great. You know, let others come to the table, and, you know, maybe through that open forum we were talking about, maybe just having a conversation with the community. What kind of holds them back from participating? Make it a safe thing, but have them take some ownership too in all of this. And then showing up as allies. And I think it sounds like you are, right? And being an ally means, how do you support people that may be in a group that is underrepresented, or it's like they're not part of the in group? And that could look like a lot of different things, right? It's not just race or gender. It could be, you know, you all went to school together, right? And there's like these people that are not part of your group. Stand up for them when something, you know, doesn't sound right, and it's hard to do. But being an inclusive leader requires that you become an ally for people that are not part of the in group. For yourselves, stay curious. Proactively seek out others' experiences. Try to understand their different points of view. So again, just stay curious. Be humble. You know, we all don't know everything. We don't know everything about everybody. So take ownership when you make a mistake, or, you know, maybe you did say the wrong thing, you didn't mean it. You know, be humble about it and say, yeah, you know what, I was wrong. And people, that goes a long way with people. And continue to be courageous. This work is not hard. It's difficult conversations. It's uncomfortable. You know, it sounds kind of cheesy, but, you know, we don't grow. So continue to act with what's aligned to your values as an individual, even if it involves taking personal risks. And then just some other, you know, pieces of advice or words of wisdom, I guess you could say. If you are in a diverse group of people that don't look like you, or you know, and you become uncomfortable, right? Just again, practice active listening. Listen to learn. You don't always have to respond, right? Just just listen to learn, be inquisitive, ask questions again, find out why people feel the way that they do. You may hear, similar stories to that we heard today from your group. Take time to understand someone else's why and put yourself in the position of the other person. Put yourself in someone else's shoes for a little bit, to kind of, just feel what maybe they feel as best you can, to change your perspective on things. So with that, thank you. And I'll send over some of the resources. You'll have this presentation if you want with you on stuff, if you, Teresa, you want to get us all back together. But this was great. I really loved meeting all of you, and I think you're doing great work.
Thank you so very much. Teresa, go ahead, please.
Yeah, Krista, this was amazing. Thank you so much. I feel like it was kind of perfect timing, perfect place for everyone. I was actually on a training yesterday, and we were, it was a PSEG training, and it was strategic thinking and decision making, but it was really, rather than focusing on the what are we doing? It's the why are we doing it? And you mentioned someone else's why, Krista, but kind of tying into our DEI for the chamber. I mean, this year as the chairperson, my focus is really engagement of our board, engagement of our members, engagement with the community and whatnot. And with DEI before, I helped Dave with that initiative, and we were focused on our what do we want to do? What are we trying to do? And, it was the best of intentions, and we did everything that we could at the time. And I truly feel like Harvey has stepped up and he's finding our why. And if that's our, a commitment statement or whatever he feels, but he has just, his thoughts are snowballing. I think that we were inspired by him, especially today. After hearing him today, I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we doing, Harvey? What are we getting on board with? But I really think that he's going to help us find our why, and that's going to be impactful for the community and those folks that we want to engage to make ourselves inclusive and really, I don't know, just emboldening everyone. So thank you, Krista, and Bill, thanks for putting this together for us, and Mike for hosting it for us, and Jennifer, of course, you're excited about this, so I know we're going to move forward with it. So that's all I have to say. I know it was a lot, but thank you, everyone.
And Krista, before you go off, would you change the host to Jennifer again?
I'm already the host.
Oh, okay, good.
Oh, you are? Okay. I've had that happen where we've given passed it off, and then that person says, thanks a lot. And then the rest of us who had another hour of a meeting just kind of vaporized.
It just shuts down.
Yeah. So Krista,
thanks for dealing with my technical difficulties in the beginning. I'm glad it kind of worked out. I was getting nervous.
That's the biggest problem we all have today. Life is good. So thank you so very much, and we appreciate everybody's involvement today. Jennifer, is there anything you need? Well, I'll turn it back over to Bill. He's got to earn his pay today. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, Dr. Corbett, and I also want to thank Krista for the outstanding presentation. You've given us so much to think about and act on. And again, thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Jennifer, for all your behind the scenes help. And of course, thank you all for attending, and especially those who shared their experiences. Really powerful additions to our program. Before we adjourn, I'd like to let you know about our next workshop sponsored by the Business Education Committee. It's on succession planning with panelists Kim Gattuso of Dry Guys, Troy Blanchard of Chemours, and Dan McCoy of Unique Electronics. It's going to be on Tuesday, April 25th at 8 o'clock. It'll be in Tillis Hall, the boardroom, room 123 on the SCC campus. And we hope you'll join us, and please see details in the Chamber e-newsletter about this succession planning workshop on Tuesday, April 25th. So we look forward to seeing you next time, and thanks again for everyone's participation today.